All right. Well, I see the registration, the attendee list is growing. I think we're getting close, so we're going to go ahead and get started. The fun thing about these webinars is I get a chance to see the attendee list and connect with people that I see things happening. And Lisa Hurley, I see you're on, and I see that you've joined the ranks of boat owners. So I hope you enjoy being on the water in Nebraska, and I hope you enjoy that. With that, we're going to go ahead and start our webinar. Our first part is the housekeeping. My name is Ron Kresha. I'm with Golden Shovel Agency. I'm the Chief Operating Officer, and I had the pleasure of meeting our presenter in Florida at a conference, and after seeing her presentation, thought it'd be great for our clients and the people that we interact with. So in a minute, I'm going to introduce Meg to you. Before I do that, just a reminder to everyone, we do record these, and if you would like to see a recording of this afterwards, for any attendees, we offer that. And we just ask that you don't redistribute that. Of course, use that for your own purposes, but a lot of information goes in these, and there's a lot of research, and we ask that you keep that for your own purposes and just not send it out. The last piece is two other pieces. Questions. If you have any questions, please chat those up to us, and I'll make sure that I interject those into Meg at times that I can find where we have natural breaks, or if something's really pressing, I'll make sure that I interrupt and ask that question. And the last thing is we'll get this question after the presentation, so I'll do it now. If you would like, Meg is available, and she does do consulting. She does do seminars. And if you are interested or know of someone that might be interested in contacting Meg or her group, please feel free to do that. We love it when our partners find natural fits with people and can help them out. So that's why we do this. With that, I'm going to introduce Meg Manke. As I said earlier this year, I was doing a presentation on workforce and millennials in Florida, and Meg was the presenter right before me and did just a fantastic job in talking about change management and communication. And we thought it'd be a great topic to offer to our clients and the people that work with us about how they can manage through some of the changes coming, how they can help communicate with their boards, their stakeholders, and so forth. So with that, the last piece that I'll leave you with, just an interesting piece. I asked Meg, how did you get here? And she said that she used to work for a gold mine, and that gold mine had gone through some transitions, and throughout that, she needed to figure out and was helping people with those transitions. But of course, the fun thing is, as she said, the word gold mine, I'm like, who doesn't want to work at a gold mine? I mean, you just pick things up as you leave. What an awesome opportunity. So I smiled a little bit when I heard that. So with that, Meg, I'm going to turn it over to you, and the floor is all yours.
All right. Well, thanks, Ron. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with some folks today, and it was lovely to meet you, especially in Florida I think, wasn't it February or March? I was in March. That's right. It was lovely and sunny, and it was a blizzard back here in western South Dakota, I think in Minnesota as well. So it sure didn't hurt my feelings to be stuck in Florida. So a little bit about me. My name is Meg Manke. I'm the COO and head of training for Rose Group International. And I grew up on a ranch in western South Dakota, so I'm just a proper old ranch kid. But I had an opportunity to work really hard growing up, and my dad also had an excavating business, and I would help him in the summer. And so I was in the ditch, leveling ground and putting pipe together and laying drain tile and stuff like that. And we had a particularly long, hot day one summer, and got up out of the ditch, and I said to my dad, I can't believe you do this for a living. And he said, I know, I can't either, but I'm going to make really darn sure that you don't. So that's why I always had an opportunity to work so hard. I think my dad wanted to make sure that we would go to college and get a job that probably wasn't so hard on our bodies. My folks still ranch, so I really appreciate the opportunity to take my own kids out there and have them learn all about, where things really come from and the importance of the cycle of ecosystems and the environment and life in general. But I'm happy to be doing this instead because I do really love to work with people and help folks through change and really, what we do is help people understand each other through change. And so one thing, I guess I should show you the picture of myself. So I'm sharing my screen. There I am. One thing that we really focus on with all of our groups is this idea of teamwork and team dynamics and understanding how that actually works. And so you see here, there's pictures of marathon training. I'm a runner, and marathon training it's really hard. I mean, you get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go running before it gets hot, and then you have to figure out your cross training, and then you can't eat the chocolate cake or the brownie, and you're supposed to eat chicken. And I am here to tell you, I have tried to fix chicken in most all of the ways, and it seems like it's just dry no matter what. I mean, you can make it taste good, even if it's dry, but it's really hard to get away from that. So marathon training is hard, and a lot of times I'll find myself even in, just a 4-mile run. I went on a 4-mile run a couple mornings ago, and it was brutal. I was not even 2 miles in, and I just felt crummy. And so even on those days when it's not a big long run, it's still hard. And I think to myself, why in the world? Why do I do this? What is this all about, anyways? And really, what it's about is the reward. At the end, when you finish a race, I'll never forget, I finished my first half marathon, and I bawled my eyes out. And, we weren't really even allowed to cry when we were kids. So crying seems silly to me, but I was just so happy and so, I guess, impressed with myself that I actually did finish that half marathon. And since then I've done, several marathons, and every time I finish, it seems like I've accomplished some new goal and learned some new things. And the reward of being with people that are like-minded and are working towards the same goals is another thing that's really rewarding about running. And so you see here a picture of some of my band of running miscreants that hangs out with me. This is a team that we did a marathon relay a couple years ago. And so we find pretty often that things are kind of the same in business, that change and communication and culture they can be really brutal. People can be hard to get along with. You can't understand where they're coming from. Particularly, I think in the industry, I'll say that you guys are in with economic development and growing rural communities or communities in general. It's hard to get everyone on the same page, and it's especially hard because you're not really sure where the perspectives are coming from. And everyone thinks a certain way and does a certain thing, but particularly with the initiatives and situations you all are faced with, everyone does something for they have their own agenda. And I don't mean agenda in terms of, well, sometimes I'm sure it is political, but not agenda in a nefarious way, but everybody wants to develop a community for a certain reason, and that reason might not be the same reason as someone else's, and that can cause some heartache between folks. So then really the question is, again, why do we do this? Why do we, take up a career as, a director of an economic development organization, or even volunteer as a board member, or work in a chamber of commerce? Why do we do that? Because there are lots of jobs. There are lots of jobs all over the world, and the world has become a really small place. And so why is it that we want to live and operate in these rural communities and really try and engage the community we have and invite new people in? Because of the reward. And the reward in your guys' world is, young families coming into your communities, buying homes, shopping in your stores, engaging their children in your communities and schools. It's an opportunity to see people network and meet new folks and learn about other people, and watch children grow. It's about seeing, the economy of your organization grow with new businesses, and really, the exciting thing behind any industry and any team is the opportunity to make awesome things happen. So you see the picture there with everybody fist bumping in the middle, and that is the essence of what we focus on with Rose Group, or we call ourselves RGI. That's what we focus on, is how do we help everyone see what the shared vision and shared goals are, understand all the folks around them and how they contribute to getting to that goal, and then making sure that every day you're working towards those goals, and that there isn't anyone trying to intentionally or unintentionally stand in the way of that success. And so we have a few ways that we do this. So the first thing we do is culture type everyone in an organization. And our culture type assessment is available on our website for free. And then also when we engage with one of our clients, we have a different way of applying it. So you actually get to see a scatter plot of all the folks in your organization, which I'll show you here in a little bit what that looks like. Hey, Ron, if I put the link in the chat window so people can go out and do the survey while I'm talking about the 4 types, is that okay with you?
That is just fine.
Okay. I'm gonna put that in here. So if you go out to that link that I've just put in the chat. Oh, wait a minute. That only went to Golden Shovel. Let me put it to there we go. Okay, so now you should see a link. It goes out to a survey. It takes maybe 3 minutes. It's not super long. And it will show you one of 4 culture types. And this is how we start engaging with organizations. And this is how we learn how to understand where other people are coming from. And so a little bit about the culture type system before we go into defining what the 4 different culture types are. So Carl Jung is a gentleman who's a psychologist in the early 1900s, and he came up with what we know as the 12 archetypes. And those 12 archetypes, he said, were, we could assume pretty much we know that people live and operate in about 12 different ways across the world. And so that work that Carl Jung did, and if you want to look him up, he's Jung, J-U-N-G. And so that work he did was then it went out to Myers and Briggs, the mother-daughter team, and they created a Myers-Briggs type system. And I'm sure that most of you are at least familiar with it. If you are, I am an ENTP. And so we've got the 16 Myers-Briggs type indicators, and then we've got DISC, we've got the predictive index, we've got Gallup Strength Finders 1 and 2.0, we've got a color system, we've got the social styles behavior communication quiz. So we've got all these ways to really assess ourselves. And that was the next thing that came out of Carl Jung's work was, well, how do we know more about ourselves and how we as individuals and our characteristics really play into our world? And so Rachel and I looked at all that work. Rachel's my business partner. Rachel and I looked at all that work and we said, business has borrowed all of this really cool stuff from psychology and made it very useful. And that is awesome. But one thing we saw was probably missing is all of that good work didn't really give us an opportunity to assess how teams are working together. So if you can imagine that everyone on a team, say there's, let's say there's 16 people on a team, and they all take the Myers-Briggs assessment. So they learn a little bit about themselves and how they kind of see the world and interact with others. Yeah, and then they go back to the boardroom and they're all sitting around in the boardroom and it says, one says, well, I'm an ENTP, and the next one says, I'm an ISTJ, and the next one says, and there's all 16 of them are a different type. Well, how in the world are we going to actually keep track of all of that? And then try to figure out not only ourselves, but the other people around us. And so what we decided to do was create a system that was for business, made for businesses specifically, made for teams specifically to assess and understand team dynamics. And so that's how we came up to the culture type system. So these 4 images that you see on the screen are the logos, or not logos, the icons for the 4 different culture types. And those 4 different culture types are fixer, independent, stabilizer, and organizer. Before we go on, Ron, do we have any questions or anything? Should I stop?
Yeah, I was just going to actually have you pause for 1 second. I did send the link out again. I had one person asked to make sure they got it. I hope they got it and received that. But I want to pause for just a second, because I want to create an intersection here about what you just said there, and why I thought when I heard you in Florida, this could be very beneficial to the economic development groups that we work with. One of the hardest things I think our clients and the people that we work with is they have a board. They're an economic development authority or an economic development director, and they have a board that is made up of a whole bunch of leaders of teams. And so there's this interesting dynamic that I see many, many times of our economic developers, where they're trying to be the catalyst for a change. They're seeing all this great information, but now they have to convince leaders of other organizations, and not necessarily having the typical boundaries you might have as a team lead or within an encapsulated team. So I think when I heard this presentation, Meg, and I'm offering this up to the audience, what I see here is this is an opportunity to give information to our economic developers so that they can start to lead their boards and their team down these cataclysmic changes that are coming, and hoping to give them some of the tools. So I just wanted to make some connections there as to how I think this bridges nicely from what you've been doing with businesses in the private sector, really nicely to giving tools to our economic development directors and our clients.
Awesome. I always appreciate it when there's someone else to help me explain why this stuff is useful. I really appreciate that. We've actually had an opportunity to work with a couple of chambers and nonprofit organizations as well that have a board component. And I have to say, honestly, I think that setup, that organizational structure, is a little bit more difficult to work in than traditional corporate structure, just because exactly what Ron said. I mean, you basically are bringing all the strongest leaders in a community together, or a lot of the strongest leaders in a community together to make good decisions based on what's right for the community. And so you've got a bunch of folks in the room that, not that they're not challenged at their own organizations, but they're the leader. And so there isn't any perceived authoritative structure, and nobody really necessarily, quote unquote, gets to be the boss. I mean, of course, you have presidents and vice presidents and the executive director, but there's a lot of shoulder shrugging, and is that really the right thing to do? And if someone starts to really soapbox and take over a meeting, it's hard for any one person to say, okay, Janice, that's enough today. So I do think I've seen teams use this in the nonprofit world and government agencies, and it really, really does make an impact.
And Meg, let me offer this up as well. And I know I'm probably preaching to the choir a little bit, but I just want to articulate this. One of the things that we see so often when we work with economic developers and leaders of in this space is, not only are they, so I can work with somebody who in a community, an economic developer who has really fostered the idea of how they're going to do their new digital marketing, how they're going to really attract businesses, workforce, and all that. And they've done all of this hard work, and they have that. Now they take that as a package and they go to a board, and we see this all the time, and they have to suddenly walk a very fine line between, okay, I'm here to I'm accountable to the board, but yet I want to present to you an idea that, oh, by the way, is going to change everything that happens in your companies. And so suddenly that there's this new dynamic of conversation where they have to go from catalyst to salesperson to managing and herding cats. all at once. And so I think that's where your tools and skills can be beneficial. So, and I'm going to go on mute now.
Okay. Yeah, and in the meanwhile, somebody's in the office trying to buy Carnival tickets and wants to know what's going up across the street from the Burger King, and oh, and by the way, my sewer doesn't work. Yeah, we don't handle that here. So yeah, it's certainly an interesting dynamic. So I'm going to go on to the next slide here, and these are the 4 different culture types that I had mentioned earlier. So we're going to start in the top left corner with a fixer. So fixer is, well, I should ask, did anybody have a chance to take the assessment? You can just put a note in the chat box with what your type is while I'm going through this. So a fixer is chaos tolerant and team driven. And so the chaos tolerant, meaning to them what that means is they want freedom. They want an opportunity to do things a little bit differently and think freely and brainstorm with other people about what's going on with a certain situation, or just, the dynamics of the world in general. And they're team driven, so they do like that opportunity to get everybody in a group together and run to the boardroom or meet up at the local pub and have a beer and talk about how this is going to impact everybody all together and how we can all make the best use of it. And so that's kind of the dynamic world of a fixer. They'll grab the marker. Somebody comes in with a new idea and they grab the marker and run to the conference room to start whiteboarding, and they're yelling down the hallway to everyone else, "Hey, you guys, come on! We got this really cool new idea. Let's see how it's gonna work out." And then you've got an independent. So on the top right side, we've got our independent. Now they're also chaos tolerant, and they really like an opportunity to be free thinking and innovative and lead a really kind of a genuine or authentic life. And the best thing you can do for an independent is give them a piece of a project or a job where they have some autonomy to make some decisions and be really creative with how that thing is going to turn out. And because they're self-driven on the right side, they're self-driven, they really like the opportunity to maybe work alone or think by themselves first. So the real cool thing about the way we've got culture type set up is that we've actually crosswalked all those systems that I talked about earlier, the Myers-Briggs, DISC, social styles, communication quiz. We've walked a lot of the major players through this and laid it over it and found out that an extrovert can live anywhere and an introvert can live anywhere in here. So when we say self-driven, that doesn't mean I'm an introvert. It means I could be an extrovert and still like the opportunity to process some information by myself before I go talk to the team. We'll use me as an example. I am an independent. And anytime my business partner brings up a new idea, she's a fixer. And she comes screaming into the office and she says, "Hey, guess what? We just had this really cool new opportunity, and I can't wait to decide how we're going to leverage it and what we're going to do and who we're going to work together with. And we need to book plane tickets." And I'm slowly backing away towards the door as she's talking to me. And then I say, "Hey, I'm going to go to lunch. I'll be right back." And so that fixer in Rachel is has the tendency or desire to think, "Well, what the heck? She doesn't care about what we're talking about. She doesn't care about this cool idea. And she just bailed on me." And the reality for the independent is that, in fact, what I needed was a little bit of time to process what in the world she just dropped on me. And so those self-driven folks, they like an opportunity to process some information before they decide, make a few decisions about things for themselves, and then go back and interact with the team. And then we'll go to the bottom left, and we've got a stabilizer. That stabilizer is team-driven, like the fixer, but the difference between a stabilizer and a fixer is that a stabilizer is order tolerant. So below the line, below the horizontal axis, folks are order tolerant. Now that doesn't mean necessarily that they're the most organized people that you know, and that their desk is always clean and their business is always, tidy and organized. What it does mean though is that when there is chaos, they really prefer to figure out how it can be ordered. And so a stabilizer is team driven and order tolerant. they take any new opportunity or new information and they say, okay, that sounds great. And then they'll ask you like 10 questions. And their questions usually have a lot to do with who's going to be impacted, how are they going to be impacted, when are they going to be impacted, why are we doing this, is it worth it, what's the desired outcome for the people. So a lot of times stabilizers ask questions about how the impact is going to affect people in this situation. And that's because they are team driven. So they really think a lot about the folks around them, and also themselves and what their experience is going to be like if this change happens. And then we move on to the organizer. So the organizer is order tolerant and self-driven. And so the organizer, if you give them new information, they're going to do the same as the stabilizer. They're going to probably start asking questions right away and seem a little bit resistant or hesitant to accept that change because they need more information. So but they want information for the sake of, I say, for the sake of having it. So they want to know, well, what's the budget? What's the scope of this project? How many people, how many families do we want to try and get into our community? Or, why would we do a downtown Friday nights event? And is the cost really worth the benefit? And what is the benefit? And how are we going to measure all this to make sure it's successful? So, and the other thing about those organizers is that they are self-driven, like an independent. So they might seem really hesitant to chat in a group until they had an opportunity to really think about what it means. So a lot of times when you're working with a self-driven person, I actually worked with someone who was self-driven more so than I was. Now I'm thinking and finding out. And every time I would take an idea to him, I'd say, hey, look at this. This is a pretty cool idea. What do you think about this? And I thought I had it pretty well outlined, but I never had it outlined enough. And this organizer that I worked with, he was like, yeah, I don't think we're going to do that. Because I wanted an answer right now. I'd take it in and he'd say, yeah, we're not going to do that. And I'm like, well, how come you never like any of my ideas? And then, we would go away and the next morning he'd say, I really thought about that and this does seem like a good idea and we should have a meeting about it. So I was always like, are you just trying to steal my ideas? But that wasn't really what he was doing. He was an organizer and he needed some time to process how it would actually work. And I wasn't answering enough of his questions because I'm an independent and chaos tolerant. So I thought, well, we'll kind of wing it from here. And so you can see how the dynamics between the four different types really can impact how a conversation goes. Another thing I'll tell you is that fixers and organizers have pretty much exactly opposite perspectives on the planet, right? So fixers are team-driven, organizers are self-driven, and fixers are chaos tolerant, organizers are order tolerant. So you can see, I'm sure you're picturing in your mind a couple of people on your board or in your team, and the organizers got a, they've gone around to the community and they've got a petition signed for whatever the change they want to have happen, and they've got all the documentation to say why it should happen, and they did a feasibility study that they chose to pay for on their own, and all this crazy stuff. And the fixer, and they sent it out in an email before the board meeting, requested everybody read it so we all know what's going on and we can use our time effectively. And the fixer is sitting there and says, I didn't get an email. And the organizer is thinking, I would just like to choke you. What do you mean? I sent it out 3 different times in 3 different formats so everybody could open it up and all the things. And the fixer that isn't necessarily how they see the world. And the organizer is frustrated because that is how they see the world. And so what we really talk about, the next step in understanding culture types in terms of team dynamics, is to learn how to appreciate those differences and use them instead of squandering those opportunities to be more effective as a team. We say, oh well, Fixer Freddy never reads my stuff, so I'm just going to quit involving him. And Ollie the organizer is always trying to boss me around and be a micromanager, and so I'm just going to ignore that person when we go into our meetings. Instead of that sort of perspective, we say, well, hey, Ollie the organizer has some really crazy good skills that you don't have, Fixer Freddy. And so when we do want to work on an objective, we should make sure that Ollie goes around and gets the petition signed and does make sure feasibility study is done and talks to all the right people and gets the change makers involved. And Fixer Freddy could get teams of people together and talk to them and be creative and thinking about, the 7 different options that we have for this new exciting project. And the stabilizers and independents are conversely related in the same way that fixers and organizers are. So the stabilizer is team-driven and order-tolerant, and they might drive an independent a little bit crazy because the independent is thinking, why do you ask so many questions about everything that we want to talk about? I mean, we'll get it sorted out later, and I already have 7 great ideas. We just need to figure out which one we want to do. The stabilizer is thinking that the independent, you're always fly by the seat of your pants. You never have a plan. I feel like everything that we're ever going to do is going to fail if we let you be in charge of it. So instead of that, we understand each other's different work preferences and environment preferences, and we say, hey, well, that independent can take this one sort of bristly challenge that's part of this new change initiative and turn it into something really cool. And they'll be happy to work on it on their own. They don't need a team of people, and I know that they'll get it done. And the stabilizer can make sure that everyone's on board with the objective in terms of the team, whether it's the board or other people. They could go around with the organizer and get the petition signed. And the stabilizer would be there to say, hey, this is why we're doing it, and this is how it positively impacts all the different associations and organizations within our community. And so that's really how those team dynamics and understanding those team dynamics can make a positive impact on the team that you're on. And then also you can use it for understanding your external stakeholders, so community members, business owners, really understanding them and where they're at. So if you had a stabilizer business owner and you're trying to make a big change on a street, on a street that their business was located on, they're going to need a lot more information before they feel comfortable with that than, say, a fixer might. And so knowing that a little bit more, having that insight into the preferences of the folks that you're working with helps you tweak your message just a little bit so that you're actually answering the questions that they're thinking of before they think of them. And it really cuts down on the amount of time and energy that people put into getting through change, which is what we'll talk about next. But I'll take a quick break and see if Ron has anything to add or if we've got any questions.
Perfect. You read my mind. You read my cues over here. I don't have any questions right now. So I thought, Meg, if you need to take a drink of water, if somebody wants to type in a question, that would be a great time. And then I'll have you head into your next segment. So I'll watch the chat box here for just a second while you grab something to drink.
All right, thanks.
So one question that has popped up is this tool available for people to use with their boards? And maybe that's something you're going to address at the end, but I'll just throw that out there to put that on the parking lot for you to address now or at the end.
Okay. Yes, it is available to use with boards. And the next slide is because maybe, yeah. So it is available. We do consulting work. Yes, I can send the survey link out with the presentation in the fall email. Absolutely. Or Ron probably will, or someone with Golden Shovel. So this next slide is a sample of an organization that we've worked with. And so what we do when we go in and engage with an organization, whether that's an executive retreat for a board or an executive team, or doing any individual work with supervisors in an organization. So this is a PR firm that we've worked with in the past, and this is a scatter plot. So this is the way that we depict to the clients that we work with how their team is structured, and then we talk through those differences in perspective from all of the different kind of team members and what kind of dynamics that creates. And the way we do it is we engage with the organization, the folks on the board, so in a way that they share stories with us, and they say, oh yeah, well, I'll start by saying, oh, well, I'm sure that in this example, I'm sure that Kira and Andrew, so Kira's down in the bottom as an organizer, Andrew's up on the top as a fixer. And I'll say, boy, I bet Andrew never reads Kira's reports. And then they'll all laugh and look around at each other and say, wow, do you have a video camera in our conference room? Because how do you know that? Well, we know that because we study and research on team dynamics. And so then they'll start sharing stories, and we say, okay, well, what kind of conflict or undue hardship does it seem like that's creating? Well, we can't seem to ever be on the same page about what we want to do with this section of the community, or maybe it's a abandoned school building that we don't really know what to do with it, or the city owns it. Whatever, we don't know if we want to expand or we don't want to expand, or we're not sure if we want to invite people in or just build on the community that we have. And so we walk through all those different situations and then put together change plans, communication plans, and strategic value plans, where we help organizations structure their foundation within their organization or association on their values. What are your core values? Is it family? Is it opportunity to serve the community? Is it excellence? Is it outdoors? Is it fun? What are your actual core values of the team that you're working on? And then we structure all of the kind of strategic goal setting on top of that, so that at the end of every day, no matter what box you fall in or how you see the world or how different your perspective is than others, that we learn how to leverage that, and then we don't ever let those potential squabbles get in the way of those core values and then all of the objectives that are set on top of them. And so that's how we engage with teams when we actually have a client that we're working with. If you want to use the assessment, there's a free assessment. That link that's in the chat is a free assessment. You can have everyone within a certain group take the assessment, and then they can self-report. They actually get their results right when they take it, and so they can all say what they are. What that doesn't show you is this scatter plot where you can see how deep someone is into a certain quadrant within the 4 culture types. So let's see, I'm going to go on to the next. Here's another organization that we did a culture type for. So some things that are kind of interesting that we've discovered is that sometimes we'll get groups of people that are similar in culture type and in what we assume is based on industry. So in the manufacturing industry, this is a company that's headquartered in Cleveland, Ohio. And we did some frontline supervisor training for a group for them. And then we also did some coaching for their production manager team, or team members, their production managers. And what we found when we did culture type for a lot of people in these in this industry, in manufacturing, in this company, was that they were stabilizers, which makes a good amount of sense, because those folks, particularly the ones that are in the warehouse or on the line, making sure that things are being casted correctly, painted correctly, assembled correctly, they need to be order tolerant. You would assume that they would want to be order tolerant. They would prefer that kind of an environment where they kind of do the same thing every time. They always kind of know what's expected, and they know what the result will be. And they're team driven, right? And in a lot of manufacturing organizations, it takes lots of hands. Even though AI is pushing its way in, there's still lots of hands that are involved in producing physical goods. And so they want to be, they're typically people who want to be part of a team. They know that that if I do something, it impacts what the next person does, and we all kind of are in this together. So that one, let's see, what's the next one? Okay, so this is a golf club and resort. So they've got an outdoor resort or camping resort, and then a golf club, and then they've just recently added a restaurant into their mix. And this organization's got folks kind of all over the board, and I think for them that makes good sense, because they have lots of different roles and needs that need to be filled. And so you have to have somebody who can, at the drop of a hat, be able to go out and fix, a water break on a sprinkler system at the golf course. But you also need maybe an accountant, let's say, who is very order tolerant and likes the opportunity to sort of work alone and process information on their own, and make sure that things are definitely accounted for, pun intended. And then you might have some kind of crazy, re-landscaping project, or making sure that you've got enough help for the season, and have to be creative and work on projects on your own. So you might need some independence. And then, of course, you have to have an event coordinator, somebody who can make sure that whoever's putting on an event, a wedding, a family reunion, or a concert, that those folks that are putting on the event are satisfied with the service, and they understand exactly what's going to happen on the day of the event. And so you need a stabilizer on the team, because they're team driven. They care about the people and their experiences and how that's all working out, and they're order tolerant. And so they know that they would prefer things to be in an orderly manner, so there's not so much chaos on a wedding day. For any of you who have either been married or recently married off any children, or if you're planning a wedding right now, good luck. It's a chaotic day, whether you want it to be or not. And so a stabilizer event coordinator really helps cut down on the amount of chaos that happens at that event that day. So those are some different examples of clients that we've worked with in the past. The next topic we'll talk about is change, and really how those 4 different culture types interact in a change environment. So this is another potential spot for a break, if you want to use it, Ron.
Yes, and so either everyone is really engaged, or they're thinking thoughtfully, or they just can't articulate their questions. I don't have any more questions on the queue right now, and I see we are coming up on with about 12 minutes to go. So if you want to, I don't know how much you have left, but maybe we could try to get through, or at least get to a stopping point within 2 to 3 minutes, and then open it up for questions from the group.
Yep, you bet. Okay, so the interesting thing about change is that it's always happening, and it's never going to stop happening. And we all know that. And historically, what we've heard is that change is really hard and it's painful. And so let's just minimize the damage it's going to do and get through it. And so a change event is the same. The experience actually of a change event is the same. And all this research has been done sort of under the auspices of organizational change management folks, organizational org development, org psychology, industrial psychology. And so how does the change really work? Well, we have our normal state, and then we have the change event, and we go into decline, where we kind of just pretend like maybe the change isn't coming yet. And this is a place where we deny, we might procrastinate, we sort of laugh off something that seems fairly serious. And then we get to a point where we call it the let go stage, and let go is at the bottom of decline. So that's when we decide, yeah, this thing is happening, and so we have to figure out what that means for us individually and as a team. And then we've got innovation phase, and that's where typically the change gets quote unquote hard, and people, organizations have squashed innovation phase. But if we let it live and breathe, because we now understand each other and our culture types, and so we're not so frustrated with each other about the differences in perspective, and we actually understand how to leverage all that energy, we can use innovation phase to really have some great ideas that lead to other great ideas. And we can also have some great hesitations where it's like, but what about that one thing? Is that really going to negatively impact this? So it gives us, the innovation phase gives us an opportunity to really make good use of all of the creative talent that there is in the team. And then we go out to new normal, which is where we want to be. And you'll notice that on the vertical axis, we're measuring energy. And so we want the energy to be higher, or at least as high as it was when we started out with this change. And so the interesting thing is when you lay over the Kurtz change transition model with the change type. So you can see where fixers and independents don't have much of a decline because they're pretty chaos tolerant. So they say, okay, that sounds good. Let's run into innovation phase and start thinking about what's going to happen next. Whereas an organizer and a stabilizer especially are going to have a longer decline because they're asking a lot of those questions. They want to know how it's going to impact people and what the budget's going to look like, and is this a good idea? What it measures success? How are we going to make sure that we are measuring that? And so then when they get out to their innovation phase, it's a little less dramatic because they actually have already done the work up front in decline to think about what's going to be coming up next. And so they don't have those wide swings in the innovation phase like a fixer or an independent might. But what you might notice is that if this is change guided well in this example, but if it weren't guided well, it would be the swings for fixers and independents would be really wild, and they would be even more wild for organizers and stabilizers. And so when change is not done well, people have really not so great experiences. And then the time, it takes a lot more time. They have a lot more wild swings in their energy. And a lot of times it cuts down on productivity. And that's when we start losing people on teams because they can't trust that anything great's ever going to come out of what started. And so that's really how culture types and the Kurtz change transition model work together, and how we can understand different people's perspectives and help them through change more quickly and using less energy.
Perfect. So we are at the 7-minute mark away from high noon Central Time, or from the hour. So is there anyone that has a couple of questions for us? Happy to entertain those. We have some time here. And if so, just send those through the chat box. And if you'd like, you can ask those directly to Meg. I can turn your mic on. So is there anybody that would like to present a question to Meg at this time? That dead silence. Sorry, I don't even have any elevator music to play in the background.
Well, when I don't get any questions, I like to say, man, I must be really good at explaining this stuff, or everyone is so confused they don't even know what questions to ask.
So, Meg, why don't you go ahead and give us just the short information about your group, your availability, and then I want to let everybody know here we are going to offer this webinar again in July. The appeal to the webinar that we heard from folks was, how can I use this to help with my boards and help that communication string? And I'm going to make sure that we put that information a little bit more obvious out there so people can see that. But Meg, why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about your organization and your availability?
Yeah. So we travel all over the country and work. We're headquartered in Western South Dakota, and so we've been all different kinds of places working with for-profit, nonprofit organizations to help teams with their dynamics and really move projects forward, move growth forward. We come in a lot into organizations who are in a growth phase, and they've sort of lost control over what used to be and what is now and what it should look like in the future. And so I just worked this week with the credit union that they're going through a lot of change. They've acquired a lot of businesses, moved into new communities, and keeping their executive board informed on what all that looks and feels like, and then also their staff, and then their client base or membership. So that's a good example of the kind of ways that we work with organizations. We do executive group training. We do individual executive coaching, and then we also do mid-management level or frontline supervisor training and coaching. I don't know if that necessarily so much applies in this group, but particularly what's probably of interest is that executive group coaching for teams. Another product that we offer is a certification in IX leadership. And IX leadership, which stands for internal experience, is the concept that the concepts, it's the umbrella that holds all of these concepts that we talked about today. And you can find that in our book, which is on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, available in both hard copy, Kindle version, and then also it's on Audible. And so with the book, we've created a certification process whereby someone can be certified in IX leadership, and then they're actually licensed to go out and do the scatter plot, coaching or training, or use it within their own organization to create more strategic alignment in teams in their worlds, wherever that is. And so you can find us online. We're at rosegroupintl.com, and all the places on social media. You can find me, Meg Manke, and Rachel, the same, Rachel Headley, Headley, and we're all over online. If you have any specific questions for me, you can sure shoot me an email. My email is meg@rosegroupintl.com.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you, Meg. Thank you so much. Always good to hear your information again. And those that are in attendance, feel free to send any questions, and we will be sending out the recording and the information that we've had. So with that, I just, again, want to thank you, Meg, and thank everyone who spent some time with us today.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Well, have a wonderful day, and enjoy the holiday coming up.
All right. Yes. Happy Independence Day.